let me start off by first making a couple of announcements. The big one is, as you may all know, MCYU has begun to do a lot of research into education and how education has been impacted by the pandemic. But we're also interested in how everyone that attends these MCYU events views the MCYU events. And so we have a student in the Department of Geography doing a master's project on how our MCYU families view the McMaster Children and Youth University program. And so she's recruiting parents to take part in a 30 to 60 minute online interview. And that'll be accompanied by a short questionnaire. And then the questionnaires will relate to the individual factors, the community and societal factors that shape one's abilities and decisions to participate in these MCYU lectures. So as long as you have some member of your family, a child that attends these events, you're eligible to participate. And if you choose to participate, which is completely voluntary, you'll get a $30 Amazon gift card. And if you're interested in participating in this research, there's an email address on the right side of the slide. So please contact Hannah directly. We will post this information on our website. So if you want to participate in research over the summer, please give us a shout, and Hannah will get back to you and arrange for appropriate times to meet. And a couple of housekeeping notes with MCYU. So one big announcement is that next year will be our 10th anniversary. So November 2021 marks 10 years of MCYU. And we're going to be celebrating by creating a video montage and a digital scrapbook with feedback from everyone in the community. So we're going to be reaching out to all our attendees. So we would encourage you and ask you to please provide some of your thoughts, your reflections on your experience with MCYU over the last many years that you've all participated. And would love to be able to share those memories with everyone out there. And finally, the McMaster Museum of Art is putting on a virtual exhibit called The Cut, the Tear, and the Remix, Contemporary Collage and Black Futures. This is a virtual exhibit that anyone can visit. It's available on their website, and we'll put that link in our webpage as well. And the exhibit explores how 8 contemporary artists engage in the excavation of a future informed by their individual and ancestral connections to the African and Caribbean diaspora. So those things are all ongoing, and I encourage you to take part in those activities. So let's get rolling with Grant Maltman. So Grant Maltman is a graduate of the University of Western Ontario. We'll forgive him for that, even though this is McMaster. So there you go. And he has more than 30 years of experience in cultural resource management and heritage presentation. He has served as a curator of the Banting House National Historic Site of Canada. Though his connection with the museum came years earlier, when as a student at Sir Frederick Banting Secondary School, he presented the Canadian Diabetes Association with a check from the student body for the development of the Banting House Museum. And how fitting is that he now is the first paid employee of the Banting House Museum. And that happened in 1993. And he assumed the role of the chief curator in 1993. As the curator, Grant was instrumental in securing the designation of Banting House as a National Historic Site of Canada. In addition, he served as historical consultant to the Royal Canadian Mint's coin commemorating Banting as Canada's first Nobel Prize recipient, and to the CBC production of the Greatest Canadian Contest. In 2015, Grant himself was awarded the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario Heritage London Foundation Award, And Grant has also served as a consultant in the development of the recently released Canada Post stamp and the Heritage Minute from Historica Canada commemorating the 100th anniversary of the discovery of insulin. So you can all see this is really important, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the discovery of insulin. And certainly we have an expert here to talk to us about all of this. As you can see, Grant has a big list of accomplishments. I think it's especially cool that he was a consultant to designing a stamp. So maybe we can start the conversation with Grant. So welcome, Grant.
Well, thank you for having me, Sandy. Really looking forward to this morning.
This is an amazing opportunity for us to share some of your experiences and your knowledge about the life of Sir Frederick Banting. But let's start off by asking you to maybe tell us a few words about Banting House and what it represents to the story of diabetes.
Well, sure thing. So you can see in this slide, this is our property here. The house was built in 1900 and Dr. Banting purchased it in 1920. And it was here on October 31st, 1920, in this very room. This is not a screensaver behind me. I'm actually presenting from Dr. Banting's bedroom. And it was here on October 31st, 1920, after a night of restless sleep, Banting awoke and put to paper 25 words that would change the course of medical research and diabetes research management, the discovery of insulin. And what the museum does is, we're not a diabetes museum. We do tell his biography, and we're going to be dipping into that as we go through the presentation. We're also home to the Flame of Hope out front, and the flame was lit on July 7th, 1989 by Her Majesty the Queen Mother. So Queen Elizabeth II, her mom was here, her last official visit outside the United Kingdom, and she lit that flame out front, and that flame stays lit until a cure for diabetes is found. And a doctor or team of doctors, no matter where they are in the world, when that cure is found, they're to be brought to London to extinguish the flame and open up a time capsule that's been left for Dr. Banting. Yep, so there's the flame there front and center. And so since 1981, Diabetes Canada, we've been proud stewards of the site, a site that really has become, as many have described, as a pilgrimage site or a diabetes mecca. So I'm really happy to be able to share some of those stories related to the house and Dr. Banting's biography as well.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about Dr. Banting. So maybe we can start off by seeing if anyone knows what these are.
We have a question, if you want to go ahead.
It wasn't a question. I was going to say that these are metals from the looks of it.
Good. Now, do you want to take a guess at what kind of metals they might be?
I have no idea. I just know that these are metals that he likely won for the invention of insulin.
Ah, so close. So this is a bit of a trick question. So I think someone else had a hand. So we'll let someone else try, and then we'll jump in.
I saw an email address. I didn't catch a name. Go ahead.
I was thinking that these medals could be won by a scientist for peace, like peace prizes.
Good try. Good try. Keep that in mind for later. I'm gonna say, so you're close. If there's nobody else, we'll just jump.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about these metals?
So this is one of the things, and I'm going to try not to get too excited, and this is where Sandy's going to control me on this talk. One of the beauties of working here is we get to share Dr. Banting's story, and he would have been a historical figure without the discovery of insulin. To put in global perspective, there are about 460 million people around the world with diabetes today, and at least 10% of them are type 1, and so millions of people take insulin every day. So that casts a long shadow on your life. Think of, you got an A- on a project this year at school, and then your parents will judge you off that project for the rest of your life. You make the dean's list when you go to university and say, with an 89, and your parents say, yeah, but remember that 95 you got in grade 6? And that's Banting's life, and that sort of overshadows everything that happened with him. So these metals are actually, so you're right, they are metals, but they're military metals. And so before the discovery of insulin, Banting was actually a decorated Canadian war hero, having served in the First World War. On the far right is a shot put medal. So if anyone does track and field or watches the Olympics, this is where you take the ball and you pitch it. And so Banting was a pretty good athlete. And when he was in the military, he won a competition. And then as we're going from right to left, we have the British Victory Medal, the War Medal, and then the far left is the Military Cross. Now, this is the second highest honor in the British Empire, awarded for bravery. 100,000 people were eligible for that award, and just over 3,000 received it. So it really shows you the context of Dr. Banting. And what happened was he was wounded in the right arm, and Banting's right-handed. So you can't do much as a surgeon because he was a captain and trained as a surgeon in the Canadian Army Medical Corps. And so he's ordered to evacuate to the rear because he's of no use. He stayed at the clearing station for about 17 hours, according to one of the reports, and his commanding officer returned and had to order him back. And so the citation reads, his energy and pluck were of a high order that day. And when he writes to his mother, he says, "Mother, do not worry, I'm the luckiest boy in France." And he wrote with his left hand just to keep a promise to her that he would write her every Sunday. And so good guess on the medals. And that's what a bit on those.
So let's move on to talk a little bit about what happened after all of that and the career that started to develop for Banting. And so can anyone guess what this might be? And what does it have to do with insulin? Have any of you seen something like this?
An early insulin pump.
Oh, good try. Some of them were about that size, but that's not a pump.
Yeah. Anybody else have a guess?
Is that a typewriter?
No.
Sort of looks like a piece of it, but no.
Yeah.
Oh, so someone in the chat, there we go.
Oh,
There we go. Someone said a scaled away babies. That's right. So this is another trick question. This has nothing to do with insulin. When Dr. Banting came to London after the First World War, he couldn't get a job as a surgeon in Toronto. So he's encouraged to come to London because there are some great opportunities here for him. And he's set up as a general practitioner. And so he was weighing babies, looking after babies when he was here. So this is one of the tools that he would have used here in his practice. He didn't use it very much, especially in that first month. He does everything wrong when he sets up his practice here. We think of Banting as this great genius, but he does everything wrong when he sets up his practice in London. So he has one patient in his first 28 days. Doesn't take over retired doctor's practice and all kinds of other issues. For the parents who might be listening in, you might appreciate this about how difficult it is to get in to see your doctor today. Part of the reason Dr. Banting didn't have a lot of patients either is his office hours, 1 to 3 in the afternoon, and then 7 to 8 in the evening. So there's not a whole lot of opportunity for people to come in. And so I often think when I try to get in to see the doctor myself and how difficult it is, I put that in perspective with this here. So good guess on the baby scale.
that's right. But then we did start to see his career shifting towards managing patients with diabetes, did we not, Grant?
Well, he actually never treated a patient until after
okay.
the discovery of insulin. So this is one of those neat stories, and I think we might touch on a bit later on. But one of the great myths around the discovery of insulin was he was on this lifelong, won't call it a lifelong quest, but he was on this quest to find a cure for diabetes because a 14-year-old boy or girl, a friend or cousin, depending on the story. And this is one of the neat things about history. History is about stories and it's about research. And it's forums like this where we get to share the latest evidence. And so this story of the 14-year-old died had been around forever, but in actual fact, after 20 years after the discovery of insulin, he tried to dispel it, saying he knew nothing of diabetes diets, never treated a patient with diabetes, and it was purely theoretical. What we're seeing here on the right on your screen where it says weigh our food is another scale. And on the left is a diet sheet for someone. So if you had diabetes before the discovery of insulin, the only treatment was known as the Allen diet. And this was a starvation diet. It was strictly portioned fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. And it's a little, I'm sorry I didn't send you a better shot at, but today we carb count. You know how many carbs you can have with your meals. So this child here was allowed 55 carbohydrates for the entire day. because you're trying to limit the amount of sugar that's getting into your body. So you could see you could have 1 egg, you could have 2 ounces of bacon. So literally you would take a strip of bacon and you could put it on that scale, as I pretend it's in front of me here, put it on the scale and weigh it. And then your parents would, that was exact amounts for the whole day. The other thing about this diet, which was extremely horrible, was your vegetables would be thrice boiled. So we all have, we all know vegetables are good for us. Well, we all have one vegetable that we don't like. Let's be honest. For me, it's Brussels sprouts. You can put all the bacon and maple syrup with them, and I still can't do them. So you take your least favorite vegetable, put it in a pot of water, bring it to a boil, drain it, fill it again, bring it to a boil, drain it, and do that a 3rd time. So there's no nutritional value in there, but there also, it would taste horrible. But this is the type of thing, and then you'd have to fast. So you wouldn't eat for an extended period of time because they're trying to eliminate the sugar. So for breakfast, you think of what you had for breakfast today. So this child had, 1.5 ounces of butter, some cream, an egg, a slice of bacon, and a whole orange. Then for lunch, again, you're having some butter, some cream, 400 grams of vegetable and a half of an orange. And then for supper, again, it's butter, vegetable, an egg, and an orange. And what you're trying to do with this is as a parent, you have 2 choices. So you do nothing, and if your child has diabetes, will eventually slip into a coma and pass away. Put on this diet, you could live anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And that's what makes the discovery of insulin so important, because that discovery changed all that. And so this is something up until the 1970s and even the early 80s, people still had scales like this on their kitchen counter, measuring everything.
Wow. And then, we know that there was also research ongoing at that time around diabetes. So this was something that a researcher might have used. So can anyone take a guess at what this might be?
That to me looks like a very early X-ray.
Very good try, because you're looking at the picture. Good for you.
Can you chime in, whoever's got their hand raised?
I was thinking that was like some old books that they come with like little thingy and a way like to just like see the picture.
Yeah, very, very good. So we had a couple people suggest it might be an X-ray, something to magnify, something to look pictures, and you're perfect. This device is called a stereoscope. And so what you do is you put your face up to where that silver part is, and you bring it to here. And when you look down, the 2 pictures that you can see at the end are the exact same picture side by side. And the way the lenses are, sort of like my glasses, they force your eyes to almost go cross-eyed. And what it is, it creates a 3D picture, which someone put a 3D magnifying glass. And it's a little tough to tell on the slide, but in the very center of both those photographs is the pancreas. So this would be a way for researchers and physicians to study. The entire body is covered on these stereoscopic slides. And so this is something that Dr. Banting probably used when he was conducting some of his early research to see what the pancreas was and where it is in the body.
And so now, in research, we use much fancier versions of things like this. So now we can put tissue samples right under a microscope and have it appear in 3 dimensions on the computer screen. So you can see how the equipment that researchers use have changed over time.
And this would be a great tool to use, because in these boxes of slides, you can have the entire body there with you wherever you are in practice. So if you're trying to look up something, yeah, you could do it just like that.
Yep.
Good guess.
So here's a very interesting story. So Grant, I think this was a young man that suffered from diabetes, and we were talking earlier about his life story. So maybe you could share that.
So this is an interesting fellow. So the discovery of insulin is something that happens really quickly. The first recording of the diabetes condition goes way back to ancient Egypt, so 1552 BCE. So it's on this document called the Ebers Papyrus, and it's the oldest surviving medical text. So think of the time of the pharaohs and the pyramids. That's the first time anyone ever recorded anything about the diabetes condition. And so over the next 3,000 years, people are learning to describe this disease, but really don't know much about it. By the early 20th century, we know we can treat it with diet a little bit, as we discussed earlier, but it really doesn't change the prognosis. And so after the discovery of insulin and the first successful tests in January of 1922, as you can imagine, people will start flooding to Toronto. This is where it's being produced. And so this boy he's an American, and his uncle is a physician. So he came up to meet with Dr. Banting at Toronto, and just sort of a doctor to doctor conversation. It says, my nephew has diabetes. He's actually a patient of Dr. Allen, the man who came up with that diet we discussed earlier. And I really hope that you could start treating him. And Dr. Banting says, I'm sorry, we don't have enough insulin in Toronto at this time. Can you wait until September? And Teddy's uncle says to Dr. Banting, he won't live to see September. And so this is at the end of June of 1922. And so Dr. Banting agrees to treat him, says, bring him up to Toronto right away and let's see what we can do. So here he is, he's 6 years old and he weighs 27 pounds. When you think of babies coming out, at 8 and 9 pounds today, this really shows that existence. He could barely, at this point, he can barely stand. You could see how hollow his eyes looked. It was terrible, but his parents were hoping that somewhere someone would come up with something. And fortunately, Dr. Banting and the Toronto team did.
And this is, I think, example of the kinds of needles he might have had to endure, right?
That's for sure. So this is actually a 1924 glass syringe that Dr. Banting gave to one of his colleagues, and this is what would be used to inject insulin. Much different from the disposable syringes that we all see today. The syringe on the left, you would boil in water to sterilize them at home. The needle we think of them being sharp today and very fine. I mean, I had my COVID shot the other day, and it didn't feel like anything. I feel mosquito bite more than I felt that syringe go in. These ones were very thick and they would bend. And what you'd have to do is after a while, to save, you'd sharpen them. So you take what's called a whetstone and you try and take the burrs out the side and to re-straighten it. And I actually had one visitor talk about how her father would straighten and sharpen the needles using the bricks from the house.
Wow. And then on the right side here, we have a example of what these needles look like now, right?
Yeah, the insulin pen, and this is so much easier. It looks just like the pen in my hand, and when you click it like a ballpoint pen, it gives you the injection in. And no longer do you have to draw your insulin from the yellow bottle on the left. It already comes in a preloaded cartridge, so you just stick it in, almost like in my pen here. This is your insulin cartridge. You put it in, you screw it, roll on, and then give you your shot. It makes diabetes management so much easier. And now we even have a patch that can go on the arm and it sits on the back and will release insulin for up to 3 days.
So now with that kind of treatment, what happened to Ted Ryder?
Well, this is a shot of Ted Ryder, that little boy in the sailor suit in the wheelchair in 1989. The patch, is it available in Canada? Is the question that came up. I believe it is. Go to diabetes.ca, Diabetes Canada website. They'll get a better answer than me sending you astray. So Ted Ryder, he went from 6 weeks to live when that photograph was taken of him in the wheelchair, and he died 71 years later in 1993. So 4 years after this photograph was taken. And think of, he never saw a cure for diabetes, but he saw in his lifetime, he saw the discovery of insulin, better ways to inject, even, as you saw from the glass syringe to the disposable syringes to the insulin pens. And he lived a full and complete life, all because of an idea in this bedroom, which really speaks to the the importance of place, and really the importance of one person and one idea and how it can change the world. And this is a living example of that.
Well, that's really amazing. So from a life expectancy of a few months to 70 years, and that really goes to show us the power of insulin.
It does, and he didn't suffer any of his major complications either, which also makes another testament to his good diabetes management. So he didn't lose his eyesight. He didn't have any amputations of fingers or toes, no kidney disease, heart disease, which are all related to diabetes. So he really is a testament to good diabetes research and even better diabetes management.
We have a quick question in the chat. Is the patch available in Canada?
That yes, so someone put up of the Omnipod. It is, so a version of it is here. Technology now is changing so rapidly. We have patches here where you can monitor your blood glucose level. Now they're working on a system where it's a continuous, called a full loop system. So you don't have to do anything. As I understand it, it's on like a pager, and it releases insulin and monitors your blood glucose level. So it works almost like an external pancreas, just like one in your own body. But yes, look up the Omnipod and the Dexcom are the two big devices that are out there today.
So all this work around the discovery of insulin led to an award for Dr. Banting. Does anybody know what that award might be? There's a picture here. Any guesses?
Someone was close earlier.
Yeah, a Nobel Prize.
Excellent. There we go. Yeah, and this is really interesting. And I'm glad people are just saying Nobel Prize. Sometimes people want to call it the Nobel Peace Prize, and it's not. It's actually it's a very long one. It's the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. And this was awarded for the discovery of insulin. And it's a little controversial because most Canadians, we all know it is Banting and Dr. Best won the Nobel Prize. In actual fact, you can see it's Frederick Banting and John McLeod, the overseer of the project, and who contributed in lab space, some technical expertise, and helped shift the research a bit. We're very fortunate that when you win the Nobel Prize, Dr. Banting received a gold coin and some money, which he then shared with Best, and McLeod shared his with Collett. But he also got these bronze replicas. So he to give out as souvenirs to friends and colleagues. So this way you can see the front and the back. And so on the left is Alfred Nobel, the man the prize is named after. And on the right, it's really neat, it's symbolic. It's the genius of medicine giving water to a sick child. And what is incredible, it's very symbolic for diabetes because frequent thirst is one of the symptoms of diabetes. And as an aside, Dr. Banting was the first Canadian to win a Nobel Prize. He was the first person associated with the University of Toronto, and he just received the Nobel Prize at age 31 for a discovery he made at age 29, which is just incredible. And just to add to that is he received it 6 days shy of the 3rd anniversary of his idea. So from idea to Nobel Prize in 3 years is just unheard of.
And that really speaks to how important that discovery was, I think. Nowadays, you know, people get Nobel Prizes, but it quite often happens 30 years later.
That's more of
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, so yeah, it's more of seen as a accumulation of all your work and your body work. But the discovery of insulin was so instantaneous. It literally changed the world on a dime. And it also speaks to issues of credit and collaboration. I mean, the Nobel, as society, we know it's two people. It's Banting and Best.
Yeah.
Nobel Prize sort of dispels that by saying Banting, McLeod, and McLeod in the public view is seen as the bad guy because he took it away from, he quote unquote took it away from us. And then poor J.B. Collett, the fourth man of the team, the man who actually purifies insulin for human use, is completely left out of the picture. And so it really speaks to how insulin is, the discovery is incremental.
And do you have a question? You've had your hand raised.
Yes, I wanted to know with the injection thingy,
Mhm.
when the boy was trying to get rid of his virus, why didn't the people just inject inside him antibodies?
Well, that's a great question. And this so ties into the COVID world that we live in today, because they're very parallel what's going on, this race to find. So what diabetes is the inability of your pancreas to produce insulin. And what insulin does is it turns the sugar in your body into energy. So no biochemist is going to like this explanation, but I'm going to give you one as a public historian's version. Think of Halloween, and you get a big bag of loot, and when you get home and you've checked it and make sure everything's safe, of course we all want to dive into it. And our parents say, no, you can't eat it before you're going to bed. Why? It's because when you have all that sugar, all of a sudden you can't go to sleep because you're bouncing on the walls. You're all excited about what happened with your friends, and you're just, you just can't go to sleep. And that means your pancreas is working, and that insulin is being produced and turning that sugar into energy. If you have diabetes, your pancreas, that organ, isn't producing the insulin. And so that sugar stays in your bloodstream and makes you thirsty, and it makes you go to the bathroom a lot trying to expel it, and it stays in your system. So it's not a question of antibodies. It's a hormone. Insulin's a hormone that works in your system. And so insulin replaces that and helps your body convert that sugar into energy. But great question. And a good parallel.
It's really important to know that, the discovery of insulin was obviously huge. There's a lot of implications, but Dr. Banting was also involved in a lot of work outside of the discovery of insulin. And this is a picture about some work he was involved in within, I think it was in the context of the military, right, Grant?
Yep, this is a really interesting suit. It's made of rubber and it's filled with water, and it helps the heart pump into the brain. So,
so can anyone guess what this might have been used for?
This will be a tricky one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't used by the Army. It wasn't used by the Navy. So that leaves.
I don't see any guesses.
No? Okay, so this Frank, it's used by the Air Force. And there we go.
Yeah.
There it is, John. Just before I said it, good for you. So yeah, this was used by the Air Force. This was for the pilots, because what's happening is the planes are going so much faster, the heart can't pump the blood into your brain. And no blood to the brain means no oxygen, and then you pass out. And having you pass out while flying, that's not going to help. And so what this suit does is it's all tight on your body and helps the part pump into your brain so you don't black out. And so they created, if you want to move to the next slide, we can show you the device that was used to help test it. So think of going to the fair and you're on the Gravitron or the Twizzler, any ride where you're being whipped around in a circle or back and forth, and you try to move and you get thrown back in your seat. So those are G-forces. And when you're thrown back in your seat and you might get a headache, that's because the blood is rushing from your brain. So that suit prevented that from happening. And so this device, anybody want to guess what it is? What it might be called?
There are various versions of this that are still used in the Air Force and in the, I know they're used in a NASA training as well.
Yeah.
Any guesses? It's a really tough one to guess.
Look at that.
Oh, someone's got it.
G-force spinner. Well done. The technical term, it's a centrifuge.
Yeah.
So where you can see the arrow pointing, there's a pilot in there. And so what you're doing is it's up and down like this. Oh, it was in Moonraker. That's right. Time for you to die, Mr. Bond. Well done. That's one of the phrases I use on my tours for the adults. Yeah, so you stick them in there and then it whips them around and it creates those G-forces. And so the pilot sits there, he's up, and then what happens is the G-force is forced, the face goes back and he's shaking, and then he either passes out if the suit doesn't work, and the suit works, he's fine. But that's the way to, and we still use that. And that was used, Banting had that built at the north end of Toronto during the Second World War. And in that great Canadian tradition, we used it until about 1989, I think it was.
Wow.
This way you could safely test the pilot.
And this, I think this slide it really speaks to how Banting felt about his work, doesn't it?
That's right. So that quote at the top, "You must be willing to take some of the risk yourself," is from Dr. Banting himself. This is a mustard gas wound on his own leg where he tested on himself instead of asking for a volunteer. And he's trying to find a treatment for the mustard gas that burns the skin. And everything was going fine until the third day when he helps put out a fire in his backyard, and the heat from the fire melts the ice pack that was on his leg. And so the dressing, the compound on top, acted like a poultice, and it started to spread again. And they rushed him to the hospital and said, "Sir Frederick, we're going to have to amputate your leg. We're going to have to take it off to prevent spread." And Banting says, "No, this is my experiment. Rewrap it. I'm going home." And this is that era where scientists are often experimenting on themselves. He and Charlie Best actually took insulin before the human trials were actually testing on a spoon and just taking it orally at the time. And so there's a very sort of sense of, no, this is something we should be doing to make sure it's safe for other people.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. We're not allowed to do that anymore. It's probably a good thing. But yes, that speaks to also, of the belief in the scientists that they believe in their work. So they need to make sure that it's safe before they move on to other people.
It also shows Banting's recklessness as a scientist too, because he did a single drop on his arm, on his hand, and it was fine. So he went the big leap, instead of from going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it was like 1 to 5.
That's right. That's right. I mean, those kinds of things are really important in that day and time, right? Though innovation was risky back in that time.
And I think it still is to this day. I mean, people are taking, when you're trying to come up with something, sometimes if you believe passionate, you're going to try and skip steps. And sometimes you win, and it works, but sometimes it's just like trying to do long division, and you miss a step, all of a sudden your rover on Mars crashes because you didn't carry his tube.
That's right. That's right. Another area of research that Banting was involved in is shown on this slide. So this is a this is a device that he I don't know. So can you explain the background a little bit here, Grant, and then we can have the kids try to guess what it is.
Okay, so this so 3 days after that leg burn, you saw Banting was asked to come to London and give a speak to Western University, sort of a town and gown council. And he spoke about the importance of aviation medicine and how air superiority was going to win the war. And he said to the London businessmen that in Germany, they have 88 of these machines and that the Allies only had 1. And they said, okay, Dr. Banting wants one of these, so we'll build it. So as you can see, we have a pilot coming out of it, and he's wearing something.
Can anyone guess what this device might be used to test?
So that when you're so high, then you can still breathe oxygen and not die.
Oh, fantastic! Right off the top, this is called the decompression chamber, and we think of it more like for when we say decompression, I always think of scuba divers, but this is the opposite. This is to simulate high altitude flights, as you were saying, and so the pressure we're trying to get better oxygen mass. So not only pilots passing out because the planes are going faster, but because they're going higher up. And this is another example of Dr. Banting skipping steps. He'd actually sneak into the chamber in Toronto, and the government and the military are saying, no, Banting, you're not allowed to go in this anymore because something could happen to you. And so there's a story one night where it pretends it, simulates being at 5,000 feet in the air, 10,000 feet in the air, and you wouldn't have the oxygen mask, and then you black out. And then some people could last longer. And so they always created a baseline and said, okay, no one can go to Banting, you can't go into this chamber set at 15,000 feet in the air until we have our 21-year-old students who can make it to 20,000 feet. And then one night, apparently Banting and it was guarded by military, and apparently Banting showed up one night in uniform, and some poor sergeant or private who's there guarding the device says, Dr. Banting, you're not allowed to go in. And Banting quickly pointed out, please understand this, Sergeant, I'm a major, turn on the machine, I'm going in.
That's amazing. That's a great story. And then the other thing is, I mean, Banting was involved in all this, the research for the diabetes, research around insulin, but he had another very different side to his life, didn't he?
He did. This is a really well-rounded Renaissance man. Oh, and someone's got a hand up already.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Do you have a question? Or do you, oh, you have a, oh, sorry, I actually gave away. I got so involved in the conversation. Go ahead.
Did A.Y. Jackson paint these?
Oh,
Oh,
genius. Wrong, but keep that in mind.
yes, go ahead, Grant.
Anyone else? All right. Oh,
Oh,
two people. Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Banting?
That's right. Dr. Banting did this. And so whoever said A.Y. Jackson, good for you, because that painting on the right is very similar to a painting that A.Y. Jackson did. So the one on the left is the only known painting from Banting's time here in this house. When he has one patient in 28 days, he has a lot of free time to develop a hobby. And so he saw a painting in a window and said, I can do one just as well. But like everything else in London, his art career starts off poorly as well. He walks into an art store, he buys thin watercolor brushes, thick oil paints, tries drawing pictures from magazines, and that painting is actually done on the cardboard that his clothes came in from the laundromat because he couldn't afford studio board. After the discovery of insulin, there's all these pressures from around the world. You know, you give us insulin at age 29, wait till you're 35, you're going to cure cancer, or you're going to cure X, Y, Z type thing. And that puts a lot of pressure. And then in the 1920s, in fact, 1927, he meets A.Y. Jackson and they become best of friends and they paint together for 13 years. They went to the Arctic, the Eastern Arctic, the Western Arctic, lots of painting trips to Quebec. And this is near Saint-Tite-de-Cap and painted on a trip that Banting and Jackson did in 1937. They'd often paint the same scene. One would be really good, and one would be Banting's. And then he'd give it to A.Y. and say, what's wrong? And then Jackson would tell him and he'd start over again. It's a tough way to learn to paint, but as Jackson said, he went from a mere amateur to an accomplished artist who's getting better with the use of color and composition, which you can really see when you compare these two paintings side by side. So good on you for the A.Y. Jackson connection, because there's actually another story of an art gallery where Banting had one of his paintings up and everyone kept saying it was a Jackson, and Jackson said, well, thank you very much. It's one of my stronger works, when Banting was within earshot. And so it's a little funny story about it. Banting does about 200 paintings and gave most of them away to friends and colleagues.
Wow, that's amazing. There's a couple of questions. Do you have a question?
Frederick Banting was part of the Arts and Letters Club, right?
Yes, good for you. Yeah, he actually was nominated for the Arts and Letters Club by Lauren Harris, or the leader of the group of seven, because Banting put two paintings in an art show at Hart House at the University of Toronto. It was a faculty show. One very bad review. The only art school Banting represented was the medical school, was what one critic said. Should stick to what he knows. And the other one said there's a soupçon of the seven. And then it was at that point Harris invited Banting to join, and it's really interesting. So Banting is using art as an escape, yet Harris nominated him for the Arts and Letters Club because he was an artist, but also because there's this opportunity. Whatever Banting said, people would listen. And so there's a letter that Lauren Harris wrote to the chief curator of Canada's National Gallery, and he says, I've met Dr. Insulin, and he has an affinity for art, but he's getting caught up in buying bad art. What we would like you to do is set up a meeting for us. We don't want to sell him anything. We just want to explain to him what we're doing. If he agrees and likes, perhaps others will follow. So basically the group of seven is thinking, okay, if we can get Banting to give the thumbs up on this, the rest of the country will follow and start to appreciate our work, because during this time, it wasn't as well received. And the great irony is here, Banting is using art to escape pressures from society, keep asking him to do this and this. Yet here, one of Canada's great artists is trying to get Banting to use his celebrity to help further the art movement.
And then I guess the sad thing here is that Dr. Banting did die far too young. And so maybe can you tell us a little bit of a story about that, Brent?
Sure. So closing off with Jackson. The last time he saw Jackson, he says, "I can't wait until this war is over so we can go back to the country and paint again." And that was in 1939-40. Banting was prepared to leave science to devote the rest of his life to art, but the war came on, and as you saw, the research he was involved with. So this is the plane crash in Newfoundland in February 21st, 1941, while flying over to England to review the state of facilities and probably transfer technology and projects back to Canada. His plane crashed in Newfoundland. It developed engine failure over the Atlantic, and they turned around and tried to come back, and the second engine failed. As you can see, it's not a Hollywood crash. There's no fire, no explosion. The pilots survived. The radio man navigator were killed on impact. And then Dr. Banting lived about 12 to 16 hours after that. Too many internal injuries, punctured lung, head contusion. They found him in a snowdrift. He got up and walked off, and it truly was a day of national mourning, because of course, when interviewing the reporter in this sort of semi-conscious state, the pilot Banting was yelling out formulas. Here, you got to write this down. You have to write this down. And the pilot, of course, had no idea what he was talking about. And so, of course, everyone wants to speculate that these were some of the big projects he was working on. But it really was unfortunate. Brought back to Canada for a full military funeral at Convocation Hall at the University of Toronto.
Wow.
And really the impact of Banting, I think, on people's lives are reflected in these letters that you had talked to me about, Grant. The fact that people are still writing to Dr. Banting.
This is one of the things. Yeah, these are one of the things that we're really proud of. In this bedroom, we have a small exhibit station where people, we thought it might make for a sneaky guest book, but instead people started writing to Dr. Banting. Students like this one here from Japan talking about how they're inspired by their work. Others are talking about how they're taking their insulin or celebrating their diversity. And it's what's really fascinating about it is they're no different than the letters Dr. Banting received in his lifetime in the 20s and 30s. Everyone is excited about the treatment, hope for a cure, celebrating their diversities and what have you. And it really speaks to the importance of place. And, there's this expectation, two things for the global diabetes community. It's an opportunity for everyone to share their own story, and you realize that you're not alone. And on the flip side, what's really interesting is often there's an expectation that Dr. Banting is going to see it. That one, "Hey, Fred, it's me, Emily," or "Dear Dr. Banting." I had a letter from a family visiting from the United Kingdom. It was to celebrate their son's anniversary. And, it's a very long letter. And then it signed off, "The Bembos of England," not to be confused with the Bembos of Toronto that Banting might have known. And so it really speaks to the importance of place and sense of community that this room represents. And, when we see I saw in the chat, people are talking about hope for a cure. When I have researchers from around the world come here and talk about being reinvigorated their work, one of the scientists who developed insulin resistance says, "Standing here will make me a better researcher, physician, and advocate for my patients. Dear Dr. Banting, I hope to continue on with your work." And it really, as I said, speaks to that importance of place and sense of community within the public.
So the place of Banting House in the context of Canadian history, these letters that you're getting, how important are these in terms of celebrating, the importance of the discovery of insulin and maybe, in Canadian innovation in general?
Well, I think what it does, two things. One, 100 years later, it was 100 years ago Monday, we had our first experiment in that journey to the discovery of insulin. But 100 years later, we have better insulin. What we still don't have is anything better than insulin. And that's what makes this room so important, and that importance of place and importance of commemoration. I mean, I can say this place is important, and I'd say that if I wasn't drawing a salary here, but it's not me who makes places important. It's the people who make places important and their projections of importance. And I think this represents this beginning of Canadian science. I mean, we're fortunate that this happened at the University of Toronto. I mean, We have Connaught Labs there. We have the University of Toronto. We have all four men at the right place. But from that, it just sparks this period of Canadian innovation and research. After the discovery of insulin, Banting in 1923 makes his first speech at the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto, largest ever single day crowd. They're there, many there to see him speak, and he speaks of the brain drain that we hear today. He speaks of how local communities aren't supporting their universities. He says the research is the greatest contribution to the welfare of mankind. And he's making that speech in 1923. We still see that on the national today. We talk about, oh, we've lost another scientist because we don't have the funding here. And so, but because of that, Banting was able to create that, and same with Collip and Best with their students afterwards, this sort of movement of Canadian science and research and development. And finally, before Banting's lifetime, he finally got to see government giving grants to researchers because he said this is something that should be done. So, this is the origin story of the discovery of insulin. His idea here in this house set in motion this chain of events that went to Toronto. But out of that becomes this great period of science and research in Canada that happened. This one event set in motion a second chain of events for Canadian scientists. So I think this is why it's such worth celebrating today. And ultimately, we have 11 million Canadians with diabetes or pre-diabetes today. This discovery is still as relevant today as it was all those years ago.
We have a question in the chat. How did Dr. Banting make insulin to inject?
Good question. So what they were using were the pancreas, and again, this is going to be a very oversimplified version, but basically you're taking a pancreas from cows because they were large, and they're grinding it up, and they're using a mortar and pestle, and they're chilling it, and they're putting, first it was a saline solution, a salt solution, and then it was an alcohol solution. And it's like bathtub chemistry is how Dr. Collip once described it. And literally you're just squeezing and this goop would come out from a cheesecloth, and that would give you that first extract. Today it's all synthetic. It's extremely pure. And this was the problem that Banting and Best were having, was getting that insulin pure. And this is where Collip's expertise in biochemistry was able to produce a more purified extract. It really, and we mentioned this earlier, it really speaks to how this was a collaborative effort. This doesn't happen with the rapidity that it does if one of these four men aren't there. They bring some expertise, they bring some personality, they bring some dogged determination. They have their fights and they're like in everything. But in the end, they came together and gave us this miracle, which we refer to and is accepted as Canada's gift to the world.
And that's really important to really stress, is, the scientific discovery has a lot of failures in it too. And it takes people with different skills to bring together lessons from those failures and perfect this kind of treatment.
Oh, for sure. And I think with Michael Bliss, I think it was in the discovery of insulin, wrote that Banting and Best were leading a race that they didn't know they were in. So up until before 1920, there were some people who were Banting and Best sort of got to the same point where a number of other scientists got. The problem is they were actually built on their work to take it further, from the beaker to the bedside. And so Banting and Best, Banting had this idea in the middle of the night. That idea was based, on articles he read from other researchers that got to a certain point, and they were able to take it to that next step. The one problem is, so we have this great collaboration as we were discussing, which is important, but the world gravitated to one man. I mean, I think it's easier for us. Even if you have four equal people, it's, name number one is always going to be a little more equal than name number four. It's going to be, oh yeah, name number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Who's that guy? And this is really evident with that photograph of Time magazine. When you can go back to your doctor's office, you're going to see hundreds of these magazines laying around. Banting was the first Canadian to appear on the cover of Time magazine, and they actually called for him to win the Nobel Prize, which he did 8 weeks later.
And I think that sort of brings us to the end of today's lecture. But the last question that I want to ask you, Grant, is that you sort of alluded to the world sort of having working on this discovery that ultimately was accomplished by Banting, but this is really a great example of how global efforts are needed, resulting in these important discoveries and how we have to keep pushing forward. I mean, we're seeing that now with the COVID thing, with everyone around the world focusing research on COVID, but insulin and diabetes is one where, Banting got the prize for discovering insulin, but research around diabetes goes on. There's people all around the world making all sorts of efforts to try to find a cure. And I'm sure, we're going to be working on COVID for years to come. And in a similar way, we continue to work on insulin.
That's true, and it's interesting how you mentioned that. So Canada continues to this day, we punch above our weight in diabetes research, and Diabetes Canada we are funding cure research, we're funding better understanding and management. Diabetes has been reversed in mice, so we've been able to, and so now it's a very simplistic parallel, but Banting and Best could treat dogs with insulin, couldn't make it to, there's Dr. Shapiro on the Edmonton protocol. That's right. With the islet cell transplants. There's also another company here in town where it's a widget that's just underneath the skin, and think of it as a honeycomb, and the bloodstream goes through it and it doesn't reject it, and it just sees it as a natural. And once that happens, that honeycomb, they take out like a little plug and are putting in an islet cell, and it's producing insulin. So that's gone to human trials as well. So it really is an exciting time in the history of diabetes research. In the first 2,000 years of diabetes research, we had 6 great breakthroughs. One was to call it, name it diabetes. The second was 300 years later, we added mellitus to it. We've probably had 3 breakthroughs since breakfast this morning. So it truly is an exciting time, and really speaks to the power of research and the power of collaboration. And I think that's something that really needs to be stressed. Yes, everybody, we have access to information so much quicker now. Banting and Best would have to wait for a journal that was, this may have been published in Europe to get here, or Australia, or where have you. Now it's just one click. You see someone's abstract, and you're prepared to move forward.
And that is a great note to sort of end on, and really thank Grant Maltman in sharing his thoughts about Dr. Banting, and encourage you all to find some time to visit Banting House when things reopen safely. And I don't know is there any prospective dates, Grant, that you know of?
Well, we had hoped to open on June 5th when we thought the lockdown was going to be lifted. So stay tuned for that. It looks like might be the 14th now. Visit us at bantinghousenhs.ca, our website there. We'll have all the COVID updates. We're on Twitter, Instagram. Just look for us at Facebook at Banting House. And if you're really interested, on our website, there's actually, in the exhibit section, we have an online exhibit on his art showing where he painted around Canada, his First World War, and those Dear Dr. Banting letters. We have a full exhibit on those. And if you can't visit Banting House and want to send a letter, there's an opportunity to leave one there, and then we'll produce and print off here in the museum. So thank you everyone for your time. It's always some great questions, and we look forward to seeing you when it's safe to travel.
So we really want to thank Grant for bringing this story to us, and remind everyone that in the upcoming year, there's going to be a number of events celebrating the 100th anniversary of the discovery of insulin. It's a really important Canadian scientific discovery, and as Grant says, it's an area where science in Canada continues to lead. And we hope you'll try to take part in some of those activities. If you also want to see some more about the history of the discovery of insulin, our friends at Defining Moments Canada have a wonderful website at Defining Moments Canada, no spaces.ca, and you can visit that, and we'll be putting that link up on our website as well. and certainly plan to give that website a visit, and you'll find some very interesting information about the history of Sir Frederick Banting. Are there any questions before we depart? Go ahead, Grant.
Of course, I feel I would be remiss if I did not mention the Heritage Minute. If you go to Historica Canada or YouTube, the Historica channel, in 1 minute, you will see how it went from the beaker to the bedside. It's a brilliant minute. It was a real honor to work on it with Christopher Ruddy, who's also helped doing some wonderful work with Defining Moments, and Allison Lee, who wrote a great book on Dr. Koloff. If you want to see how this story is consolidated into 59.9 seconds, it's brilliant.
And there's a great comment in the chat by Jay Reed saying that I owe my life and my son's life to Dr. Banting. And that's the kind of thing that I'm sure, Grant, you hear so much of.
We do, and it's I mean, I've been here forever and a day, and it's still it humbles me that I get to tell that story, because it is something still relevant. And happy anniversary coming up, I'm sure, to you and your son. And please do come visit us when you can. We'd love to show you around.
Are there any final questions before we say goodbye for the year? MCYU will be working on a number of different things over the summer. Keep tuning in to our website to learn about all the new things that are up and coming. We want to wish everybody a very safe summer. Hopefully by the time we come out of the end of the summer, things will be getting back to near normal. We hope things will be a lot better, and we will be able to go to visit Banting House and things like that. So we look forward to seeing all of you in September. Have a wonderful summer, and thank you again, everyone, for all of your engagement in the MCYU lectures and the MCYU events over the past year. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.